I think the speaker's on. Those online, can you hear us? I think you can, but let us know. Thumbs up from Michael, yes.
Probably not, I think just gonna love it.
Those online, can you hear us? I think you can, but let us know. Thumbs up from Michael, yeah. Yeah. It's the. All right, I think we got all our tech stuff sorted out. So we can get started.
All right.
Be careful of that wall.
Yep. Good evening, everyone. This is the March meeting of the Queens Community Board 2 Land Use and Housing Committee. I am Christine Hunter, the chair. Ramit Kumar over here, the vice chair. Marianne Garado from the district office, and our newest employee, Raphael Nava. We're all meeting in person for the first time tonight, so welcome. And I was going to switch the agenda slightly to put the Long Island City neighborhood rezoning polling letter, which first, which Ramit will lead us in on.
Yeah, and let me share my screen. I read through the documents. I think I understand this loop road pretty well at this point. So I'm going to do my best to explain what I think is happening, and then you can let me know if I have the right understanding. And I think we have until tomorrow to respond to this letter. So based on our discussion today, I'll just type up a response on behalf of CB2. I don't think it needs to go before the whole board. I think just this committee can decide our thoughts on the road. Okay, so here is the relevant diagram. And this is most of what's changing here. So these changes are part of the Long Island City neighborhood plan. As we all know, we're going to do a bunch of changes along the waterfront, hopefully create new public open space. The goal is to reconnect the community to Annabelle Basin and the East River. And then also there's probably going to be a bunch of mixed use development here. But for this road specifically, there's 6 different actions that are being taken. So the first is they're going to narrow 44th Drive west of Vernon Boulevard from 100 feet to 85 feet. So that is the dashed red line along 44th Drive. Everyone's seen that. It's this right here.
So can I just ask a question? So that would then enlarge the city-owned properties on either side, is that correct?
You wouldn't enlarge it because on 45th, and for me, we'll get to it, on 45th Avenue, it's going to eat up it's going to widen the street. The 45th Avenue is now 36, we're going to 35 or 36, yeah. But it's going to balance it, it's going to move everything over up.
So it shifts
It
the
just,
property.
yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's the first thing. It's a narrowing of 44th Drive. And then the second thing, as Jay Cameron was saying, is they're going to widen 45th Avenue west of Vernon Boulevard from 30 feet to 46 feet. So that 15 feet that 44th Drive is losing, there's 16 feet being added to 45th Avenue. So that's 1 and 2. So the third thing that's happening is they're eliminating 44th Drive west of 5th Street. So that's the shaded area right here. That's shaded red. Next, they're going to eliminate 44th Road west of Vernon Boulevard. So that's the shaded red right here in the middle. And then the last elimination is 44th Avenue west of Vernon Boulevard. So that's that shaded red up top over here. So those are all being eliminated.
So
and then there's,
who becomes the owner of those properties that the city owned now? Or are they city owned? They're
so as I understand it, nothing's happening to the properties. These are just paper designations that are changing. And you guys can correct me if I'm wrong.
yeah. So who owns them now? Who owns them now?
The roads, it's the city.
Yeah.
Except some of the roads, well,
Well, those roads
Fully
wouldn't
built.
existed, yeah.
so all the roads, but where the roads are being eliminated, then if they're currently city owned, that would just become city owned property.
So it's not quite so like black and white. It's more that you have street network and you have a street map that's improved, but there's no transfer in ownership or there's no like back and forth until the street itself is actually built. And then the street would be owned by either the city or the private property owner. But at this point, we're just making modifications to the city map itself. We are not like building or destroying physical roads.
Well, I'm just asking to the property, the streets that are being eliminated, what happens to that ownership?
So the 44th Street end, I believe, is already in, or 44th Drive, sorry, I should have specified. That's already public property, so that would remain public property.
Okay, so,
The 44th Road to the north is not a street, so we're just removing the paper street, and then the property just north of that, 44th Avenue. Do we know the ownership of that street?
It is city owned.
It is city owned, okay.
So a portion of the 44th Avenue, right?
can you stand up and?
Yes. Yes, I don't know if they can see on the screen, but here. So this cul-de-sac looking thing over there on 44th Avenue is owned by the city. So what we're doing right now is honestly realigning that cul-de-sac thing to make it look like, to not make it look, but realigning it so it's part of the loop road. So yes, part of it is owned by the city. There's a small portion that's owned by the property owner, but that would be, we're trying to work with them to figure out a way that they would construct it, and then as city process, this is kind of standard, they would construct it and then give it to the city, and we would maintain it, like DOT would maintain it. That's pretty standard.
Cool. So those are the eliminations, and then there's two things that are being established. So the first is what they're calling the Loop Road, which is an extension of Fifth Street north from 44th Drive. And an extension of 44th Avenue running west of Vernon Boulevard. So what that looks like is just this right angle shape here. That's being added. And then that middle part, 44th Road west of Vernon Boulevard, which is this that's being added. So this like letter F looking thing is being added. And then the last thing that's happening is this addition that I just mentioned. It's going to be sort of a little bit curved, so it matches the property line and doesn't go straight. So I think that's just a facilitation thing of the existing property.
And how wide would those new roads be?
What's our standard?
I believe 60 feet.
That sounds right. We're going to be
6 and
Yes,
60,
zero.
yeah, like the standard of today. It's 60 feet.
the street.
For a side street,
Yes, what did you say?
The streets plus sidewalks.
That
60 feet.
is street plus sidewalks.
Plus bike lane.
Bike lane within the inside of 44th Road, I don't know. But it's 60 feet so far.
So, but you know, there's gonna be demand for bike lanes.
yeah, absolutely.
So
For sure.
street,
And if, I mean, if you think about, I'm sorry, what's the name of the street, Center Boulevard, right? Where it goes along the edge of the park. That's a lot wider than 60 feet, right? It feels like it to me, thinking about it. Because
I would assume so. There's a lot of lanes off.
there's a lot of lanes and that's where the trucks, there's controversial food trucks are and.
I think the boulevard, not a.
Well, that's why I'm asking about the loop road. The loop road being only, that is the new north-south road. Is gonna be right next to the public walk, to the WAP, right? And it just, 60 feet doesn't feel very wide for all the people that are gonna live in that neighborhood.
I mean, they're going to.
Be added to that neighborhood, according to the densities of the rezoning, and it feels kind of narrow.
Do we know what the design of the roads are?
No, so that's the point, like we have, it feels like it's the chicken before the egg, but we have to be able to do this. The mapping of it now, but the design is not done, we'll go through an entire process. with
Yeah,
DOT.
but the mapped width of a street is very important. you know, the mapped width of avenues are wider than the mapped width of the side streets in the traditional Manhattan.
How wide is something like a 46th Avenue down here?
100 feet. The avenues are 100 feet.
So with these new streets that are being
So
added,
that's only,
being
that's
less
like a
wide?
side street.
Wait.
That 60-foot street is like a side street.
Wait, Christina, when you say 100 feet, what do you, where's the 46th Avenue?
It's
46th
46th
Avenue is 100 feet.
I don't know what 46th Avenue, but typically in the city grid, the avenues are 100 feet and the side streets are 60 feet. And it makes a huge difference. It makes a difference to the, you know, that's why the taller buildings are allowed on the wide avenues. And then the zoning usually gets lower
Hmm.
mid-block. And there's just a lot more that happens on the avenues also. There's more commercial. The sidewalks need to be wider. It's, you know, there's buses that run. So all of that to me, just off the cuff, 60 feet feels like very narrow for that street that, you know, given where it's gonna be, given the level of density that's gonna be developed along it.
So Christine, are you saying all those streets should be wider, or are you suggesting?
I'm only suggesting it about the new street. I mean, I know the existing.
The one that
streets have
runs
maps,
north-south?
Yeah, that new
Yeah.
north-south street. That's.
Got it.
But that's private land though, right?
Some of it is city land right now.
Yes.
It goes through the public.
Well,
lot.
which is private, which is, the
Does
red
it,
is,
red is the cities,
right,
the black is it's owned, it's private land.
right.
But the standards that we are putting on for this loop road is going to be the same. We're not gonna have like a 6200, you know, it's gonna be
Not gonna
consistent.
change.
Right, right.
So that could be one of our comments, where we
I
would
would-
like,
I mean, unless,
I mean, I disagree. Like all of the Vernon Boulevard, the existing street near there, 44th Drive, they're all 60 feet. I don't see why the new small road built here should be 40% or 50% wider.
Which is Fifth Street,
I'm thinking about high density, high rise neighborhoods. So I'm comparing it to Center Boulevard. I'm not, you know, and I'm comparing it to.
The
frankly,
The
Manhattan.
entire rezoning area has 60 feet. I mean, I don't know about the entire, but this area in the map, all of the streets are 60 feet. So
That's a problem. That's a problem. For the
well, what is
densities
Fifth
that they're
Street, do we know
proposing.
what Fifth Street is?
This street looks like a one-way. On Google Maps,
One way.
Yeah.
But it's wide,
like, sure.
And also Vernon Boulevard, the diagonal road that the F that we see here connects with does have a bike lane. So
The top of the F
Uh,
or the middle?
might be a little bit of a headache.
Okay.
Apologize. How about we say this? I feel like we're getting a little too technical here and we don't have the technical aptitude at this moment. But we could say that what we want these streets to do is be multimodal in nature. And you know, have enough public space for the density that, you know, we're expecting.
It isn't just public space. I mean, I think we have to also reference the proposed density of the neighborhood, which is more like Manhattan, frankly.
Yeah.
And, I mean, maybe I'm wrong that all the avenues are 100, but
They're
definitely they're more than
definitely-
60, they're
Yeah,
80, then they're 80. Because
The
the
most
zoning
thing-
differentiates, you can do such and such on a wide.
Yeah,
street,
Right.
Which is typically the avenue. And that's
course, of
either
course.
80 or 100.
Yeah. It's
So,
definitely not
But
100.
60 does not feel wide enough to
And-
me for how I envision, based on the proposed zoning and the waterfront access, to be wide enough.
And how the other side is, like how Center Avenue is. It's wide, it's big
Right.
space.
Right, and it's pretty busy, right?
It's very busy, but
On
it,
weekends and, I
it
mean,
feels proportional to what's there and building, like it makes sense.
also, I think for bike lanes, and we should, I mean, the ideal standard for a bike lane in a new street is to have it be actually separate, what's the right word? Protected, yeah. And, that's pretty hard on a 60-foot wide street.
right, and we're building from nothing, so we might as well do it right. I mean, Vernon Boulevard was just fitting into an existing grid.
Right.
And following on from Christine's comment, there are areas in the first development of Long Island City where you go to an intersection, it's two 60-foot wide streets, and you have 4 towers on the corner that don't really, doesn't seem like allow for enough light and air or enough comfort for the pedestrian. So
I think sidewalk widths, because the sidewalk width comes out of the width of the street. So on a side street, you know, maybe you get 2 10-foot sidewalks and what would that give, and a 40-foot wide street?
or 215s and a 30.
Or 215s and a 30, but on an avenue or on a street with a lot of commercial use, you know, commercial enterprises, you need wider sidewalks than that. And
I think I agree with Pramit that it would be good if we're going to be writing a statement on this essentially tonight, that we focus on priorities. And so things like multimodal, sufficient space for pedestrians and bikes, sort of safe streets. Like I
Yeah,
think
we're never gonna be as technical as, you know, the city's people, so I think we just tell them what our priorities are and have
Well,
them sort of.
so are we not comfortable saying that 60 feet seems narrow?
But we can
I'm
say,
not
if we don't know like what the average street width is
Agreed,
for
but-
others, we, you know, we can reference that. But we can say we would like it to be,
Why, we think
Wider.
that 60 feet is,
Yeah.
you know, is.
Well,
a typical
I,
size.
I will say explicitly, I do not want the street to be wider.
Why not?
Why not?
Because as a pedestrian, I feel much safer on narrower
but I
streets.
think, but the sidewalk width is
I
part
disagree.
of,
As a pedestrian.
but also sidewalk width, I think would be included in this width.
Yeah, I agree, but I'd rather be on a wide sidewalk with a narrow street than a wide sidewalk on a wide street. And
Even if it's 100 feet wide, like, you could have 40-foot sidewalks on either side, you know?
What?
This is an exaggeration, but I'm just saying, like, the sidewalk width is part of the overall width that we're
no,
discussing.
I totally understand what you mean. The sidewalk width is included in the street width. This is not, I mean, what we're looking at, this F is a rather ordinary looking side street in the redevelopment area. It's the same width as Vernon Boulevard, the proposal. That seems very much in context. I don't see why this street should be wider.
Right now, Vernon Boulevard doesn't have 40-story buildings.
Right. Doesn't have the bulk that they're planning to do with these new residential units.
Plus, Long Island City has is one of the areas with the fewest street trees, you know, has the least tree cover.
So I
But-
think street lights would be the kind of thing we could maybe include in a list of priorities, for example.
Well, but you're just not gonna be able to get all those things in a 60-foot wide street. You're not.
Danielle.
Yeah, I mean, everyone said it. Like, first of all, as a pedestrian, I feel much safer the wider it is, because there's room to maneuver if something happens. And also, like, we need trees, we need bike lanes, we probably want parking, I don't, but people probably will. We need big sidewalks, the wider, the bigger for all the density that is to come and is already there.
So the
And,
question for you.
and bus, I mean, ideally,
There's no-
you also want this area to be for some bus routes to incorporate access to this part of the waterfront. I mean,
Unless other people want to speak up, it seems like, Michael, you're unfortunately in the minority, and I think. Go ahead.
I mean, I agree with Michael, here for what it's worth. You know, I think Michael might be, or we might be arguing that narrower streets are, in the interest of safety versus convenience. You have wider streets, more lanes you can pass, you can feel more comfortable driving faster. And so there's that consideration. And with such a high density area, so close to the waterfront, which will have residents, commuters, and visitors, we might want to think of maximizing pedestrian usability, if that is a permissible word, you know, versus convenience to drivers.
So I
agree
would
with that, but
suggest.
No, I'm not.
Wait.
Let's do Christine.
I would suggest that if you're gonna really advocate for protected bike lanes in this area, I am afraid every day when I cross Skillman Avenue, looking at bicycles coming toward me
Yeah.
and 40, you know, if people here are gonna advocate for protected bike lanes, you need to have a wide street, period,
Yeah.
end story. It's not, we're doing it from scratch.
Yeah, I understand. I'm not, I didn't mention bike lanes or anything like that, and there should be some consideration for deliveries and those, you know. of that
Yeah,
nature.
so-
However, just in general, a narrower, less space for vehicular traffic is safer and easier for pedestrians, commuters, residents, and visitors.
But you're not taking into account the need for light and air to light the street for basic public amenity. When you have a 40-foot or 60-foot tower and only a 30-foot wide street, you don't get much sunlight. You know, if you look at this silly
Sure.
diagram,
Sure.
you know, see that difference versus that difference. And that makes a difference to somebody walking down the street, to being able to have trees on in that location, as opposed to a very narrow street, especially as Lisa's saying, if you want protected bike lanes. I mean, the protected bike lanes is a real issue, even on Queens Boulevard, which is a wide street. I get out into that median and I feel like I've got the bikes behind me and the cars in front of me. And it's not gonna help that to be a more narrow street.
Let's hear from Michael and then we'll move on from this specific point.
Hello. Hi, how are you? May I speak? I'm sorry, my name is Joanna Soto.
You want to let public members speak?
Are you a public member of this, I'm sorry, are you a board
It's never
member?
in public.
I am public, correct. I
You're
just,
a member of.
I-
Yeah.
I'm sorry?
The committee decision, I mean, or conversation? I don't know, I guess if you want to make one brief comment, I know, I'm flexible on that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much for allowing me to make a brief comment. My name is Joanna Soto. I actually live on Vernon Boulevard and I actually work in Brooklyn quite often. So I drive from this area all the way on that road all the time. There is an extreme amount of trucks with heavy lumber back and forth, extreme amount of traffic every day, especially since the congestion fees went up. People are looking for other routes. The streets are already as crowded. And now to make it narrow, I don't believe that would work. That would actually make cars more frustrated. They already tried to drive around the trucks during busy congestion hours. So just imagine if you're going to make the streets a little bit more narrow and now the sidewalks more wider, then the cars already going to be going past the trucks and it's already going to make the sidewalks a little bit more dangerous because accidents happen all the time.
Thank you.
Okay.
Michael, let's go to you and we'll end this.
Great, thanks. Yeah. So just say like again, the typical like if you go to the Upper East Side or something like this, where there are skyscrapers on every block, the street width is 100 feet. Sorry, it's 60 feet. And so
Feet on the avenues.
no, it's 100 feet on the avenues and 60 feet on the streets. And so
okay.
yeah, so it seems to me that I mean in Queens, obviously our grid is reversed. So the avenues being 60 feet is pretty typical. Like it's like a side street in the Upper East Side. I think that's like a good way to think about this side street in Long Island, in a kind of upzoned Long Island City area.
And it's just to point out that most of the high-rise buildings on the Upper East Side are on the avenues, and the side streets are zoned for lower buildings, and they remain lower. That's how development proceeds there. That's the pattern.
All right, let's keep it moving. I think what I'll say in our letter is that we want to ensure that the streets are wide enough to comfortably accommodate multimodal transportation, including protected bike lanes, wide pedestrian sidewalks, and the city with its street trees, we call the street trees, and the city will do with that what it will.
Well, I would strongly suggest that we say that 60 feet does not seem wide enough to us to accommodate this, the varied needs of this proposed high-density neighborhood.
Is that the majority position? Yeah, majority.
Well, I think we should vote just to get a sense
No,
of.
let's just vote real quick. People in favor of saying we
Wait, did
need,
everybody sign in? I'm sorry. Did everybody sign a sign sheet? You want to see if we have a quorum?
this also is just for a letter, so I don't know if it's an official vote or anything.
It's our only response. I
Yeah.
mean, there's only chance we have to say anything. So.
Okay. We have
All right, people who want us to say it should be wider than 60 feet, raise your hand.
Can you tell who's voting online?
Eric raised his hand. Kenny,
Carisha.
Patricia. Yeah. Yep, so 3 online. All right, people who are saying 60 is enough, raise your hand. Yeah, 1 and 2, 2 online. We have.
I
I
think
think
Penny
it's
has this.
double counted.
Kenny,
Yeah,
there
Penny
you
hasn't put his
for or
hand down.
against.
So it's just Michael online.
And he's just,
Sorry, I didn't raise my hand. I got to lower it.
It seems like.
I am in favor of wider streets. I like light. I like air. We're going to lose a ton of it with all this density and height.
All right, it seems like a wider one, so we're gonna include that we think that 60 feet does not seem wide enough to accommodate all this. I just don't know enough about this to feel informed, so.
I wasn't
Yeah.
calling, I just wanted to put it together, just in case you forgot. I have a problem with people not voting.
just because I'm cosplaying well, doesn't mean I.
Cool. All right, so multimodal transportation, we had a discussion about this previously. We also mentioned that we wanted to ensure that new street layout truly enhanced public access to the waterfront, so I might make some mention of that. We have questions about who was gonna be responsible for constructing a new streets and how the implementation was gonna happen. So I don't know if you all have any more thoughts or answers around that. Like, how does this actually work once these are mapped?
If it's a city street and it's owned by the city will build it and maintain it as per city SOP. Center of operations, sorry. If it's a private property, typically, and as I noted earlier, the agreement is usually, if it's on private property, the private owners will build it and then they'll sell it back to us, and the city will maintain it.
Got it.
That is
Okay.
what, I'm almost certain that's what the city law says.
Interesting.
But it is on my to-do list to like figure out like the actual details.
They actually sell it back, like you pay them for it.
I'm not sure the exact how
Well, it's
that
not a lot of money.
transaction happens. Like, is it like $1 billion? There you go. I don't know, but there is some kind of transactional
Mhm.
thing that happens.
And do you have any idea of how soon they would start construction on this kind of stuff? At least on the city-owned areas? Are they looking to do this ASAP, or is it gonna be a long time?
I don't know.
Yeah.
That's what I
I mean,
expected.
it will definitely take time to design it.
Yeah.
So it's not gonna be like shovels in one, but there'll be a design process. that'll
Yeah.
happen.
The 2 other comments that we had previously was we just wanted to understand how this was gonna fit into the larger context of all these other zoning changes that are gonna happen. And the interplay between all that. I don't know if there's an easy, quick answer to that, but I think that was just top of mind for us. And then the last point was, how would this all impact or contribute to the area's resiliency, just being so close to the waterfront? Again, no easy answer to that I'm expecting from you all, but I think these are just points we'll mention in our letter.
I believe that, and I'm not very familiar with this, but I remember Laura referring to this, that there is now a city standard for some kind of permeable paving system, which, I mean, maybe we want to put that in
Yeah.
as part of, especially if it's a new street, we really want to build to whatever the most resilient standards.
So is that the street or the sidewalks will be permanent?
I don't know that, I don't know, the details, but I would just say, well, it'll obviously be built to city standards, yeah, the private can. I don't think-
Cool. Caricia, you have your hand up.
Yeah, thank you. I was wondering, in the planning process of the street, is there going to be a study in which the community gets to provide feedback on, where street lights or stop signs or crosswalks would be placed? I think we are already determined that these are going to be 2-way streets. Is that right? Can anyone hear me? Uh-oh.
Yeah, we can.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
We're just trying to figure out like the map that we showed last time. Did we show a 2-way street on the map?
So last time we met about this, we did have some preliminary directionals. Those are not included in this particular application materials. I'm not exactly sure what the rationale for that is, but I know that there was a mix of 2-way and 1-way streets contemplated for the Loop Road and the extension of 44th Road.
Okay, and so did we see how that was going to work? Just because I know that once these things are constructed and if there's something that the community sees is needed right away, once it's already installed, and they've walked away from the plan, it's often hard for them to come back and, for example, add a stop sign or add a speed bump or add a crosswalk. So I just wanted to see if there was opportunity for making those requests at this point in time, maybe in the letter or something towards that.
Yeah, this would be getting more into DOT's territory, so
Why don't we make that a request in our letter
Okay.
to say, hey, as DOT starts designing, we would love to sit down with them.
Okay, thank you.
So for me, I have, and city planning reps, I have a question. We're being asked right now to opine on this, but it's also part of the package of actions at the end, right? I mean, or during the Euler process, so on something like width or types of access or we can also make that point, I mean, when it comes to, to our final points of agreement, we could also ask for it there. Is that correct?
Yes.
As I understand it, tomorrow's deadline is part of the overall city deadline that is given to all the other agencies as
Yep.
well. So I think we, as part of Euler, will have more chances to comment on it, but
Okay.
this is the city
Okay.
deadline.
Okay.
You can certainly put everything that you said, Christine, in your community board recommendations for sure.
Okay.
It's ongoing.
Thank you.
All right, any last thoughts on this? I think I have everything that I need. I'll probably send a draft to you, Christine, and then you and I can hammer out the details.
Great, thanks.
Cool.
Okay, thanks for me. Next, I think, Eric, you're there, right?
Yes, I'm here.
Eric was gonna give an update on, the designation of Sunnyside and Woodside as a 6 to celebrate neighborhood by the Historic Districts Council. Did you want to share anything or just talk?
I can just talk for a minute if that's helpful, Christine. The official recipient of the award is Sunnyside Shines. They'll be kind of it's their name on the application, and they'll be kind of facilitating a lot of the communication with the Historic Districts Council. But I'm going to be supporting Dirk a little bit in my role as a member of Sunnyside Shines Community Advisory Board. We heard from HDC last week and now have our first meeting with them on April 2nd. And actually, a question I have to land use is whether the committee would like to have someone participate in that conversation. I think this first discussion is going to be about, what the scope of the project will be, kind of what our interests are in terms of preservation, developing programming. HTC also talked about doing a community survey of important historic resources and sites in the neighborhood. So it might be beneficial for someone in the committee to have a voice in that conversation. But we'll know more after April 2nd, and we have that first meeting in terms of kind of what the timeline is and what our initial activities will be.
And I'm sorry, you're looking for, so wait, are you a member of Land Use?
No, I'm not.
Oh, okay. Any volunteers? Anne Marie, are you?
Yeah,
interested?
I can join that.
Okay, thanks, Anne Marie. I'll send you the details.
And can I just mention, Eric, if this is still true, that when I was part of an early conversation with HDC, they said they're interested citywide in making this year a year when they focus on housing and affordable housing. And so one of the, which I assume is still true, is that right, Eric?
That's correct.
So one of the Sunnyside and Woodside together have a lot of examples of very innovative affordable housing from the 1920s and 30s that was built with the intention of affordability. It isn't necessarily all still affordable, unfortunately. But-
Big Six.
What?
Big Six.
Big Six is, right, that's right, Big Six. All those metropolitan houses developments, the Sunnyside Gardens, Celtic Park,
Phipps houses.
Phipps, the Matthews Flats. There's just a lot, the more and to have, so they're thinking of a possible outcome or product of this effort could be like a walking tour where you could walk around and learn about all these projects, which for people listening, interested in affordable housing, it is a great laboratory. So I think, if community board members have ideas and thoughts about that, it would be great to get that participation.
Yeah, one of the outcomes of the process, and HTC has them published on their website, is our books as a result of their year-long engagement with the neighborhood or the district that functions essentially as a walking map or kind of tour guide. And the application that we submitted to them was pretty holistic. So it was about, kind of preservation of particular buildings, but also, the architecture in the housing that you were describing, Christine, and then kind of other artistic and cultural resources. So we'll be casting kind of a wide net in terms of the work that we do with them.
Thanks, it's exciting. Anybody else have a question for Eric? No, okay. Carisha, do you want to give an update on the Bliss Theater?
Yeah, sure. Sorry, I'm off camera. I'm not feeling very well. Gosh, I feel like I've said this so many times, I'm not really sure where to start. So I guess I'll work backwards. I was connected to the developer who recently purchased the Bliss Theater site, connected through Dirk of Sunnyside Shines. V was very proactive and receptive to having a meeting, so I took that meeting and shared with him how we value the Bliss Theater and how important arts and culture is. And sorry, folks, for who don't know me, I'm the chair of arts and culture, but I also sit on land use. And some of the requests that we had for this site, we were hoping that, at least some of the site would be preserved for arts and culture community use, because there is such a need here. And I see Angel on the call. Thanks for coming, Angel. And also for folks who didn't know, Angel and the Talia Spanish Theater was part of this process, like way in the beginning, before there was even a buyer for the site. We were trying to see if there could be enough public monies raised so that potentially Talia Spanish could have purchased it. But that timing did not work out. That was not it was a market rate pricing for that site. So now now that there's a new owner of the site, we're trying to see if we can have at least part of that space for arts and culture use. The developer is open to this. The developer is also open to continually working with the community as they move forward with their plans. The current tenants are going to be in that space for about another year. So there's nothing that's going to be, breaking ground. But we did want to stay in contact and communication with the developer as they move forward with any type of design plans. I know there was concerns that were brought up at the Arts and Culture Committee meeting in terms of what this might look like if there was a rezoning request or any type of plans like that, if it were to be converted to housing. And if that was going to be the case, I did also request that there be 2 and 3 bedrooms included. But again, the developer told me that this is very early in the process, that anything was possible. But I think the main takeaway that I really want to reiterate is that this is a developer who was very open to a conversation with Arts and Culture Committee and with land use as they move forward. And so I think that's the latest update. But I was appreciative that they were even willing to come to the table and have a conversation, because they didn't really have to do that. They could have just said no. And also in terms of the ideas that we had about trying to float air rights over to the Wendy's site behind it. the Wendy's folks were not interested in that idea. They did not want to sell or move. In addition to, I think there are some complexities, and this is what I'm not sure of, and I know Christine and I talked about this, about how air rights transfer would, how that would actually work in that sense. But if the Wendy's people were not even interested, then we're sort of stuck in that scenario that we have. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Chris.
Caricia, do we know anything about what the developer's plans are?
So what they told me was that, they're looking to make it into some sort of housing, with some sort of mixed retail, at the bottom floors. It felt either they weren't sure yet, or maybe they just didn't really want to tell me the plans, because of course, that, they don't want to promise anything, or I understand that. But they did say that they weren't gonna start, they haven't even engaged a designer or an architect or anything, and to reconnect with them in about 3 to 4 months. So yeah, that's where we are with
Did you
that.
get the sense that it was gonna be a demo, or?
I did get a sense that it was going to be a demo. It didn't really sound like in their plans that it was going to be, in their interest, to both preserve the theater somehow and build housing. To that point, I didn't make any specific requests or proposals, because this was just an exploratory meeting, and I really wanted to establish a good rapport first.
Yeah, makes sense.
Thank you, Carisha, for meeting with them, and
Sure.
I mean, one thing we could consider advocating for, which there certainly are other precedents for, is just the preservation of that little single-story, the facade with the
Right.
Art Deco detailing that faces
Greenpoint Avenue.
Greenpoint, sorry, it's blank for a minute. Which doesn't go very deep into the site, and
Right.
possibly be reused even as the entrance to the new building without necessarily impacting the amount of units that they could get into the building, the ultimate bulk of the building, which is, of course, gonna be the big developer's concern. And similarly, I don't know if most people are familiar with, what's it called? The Tower Square, where the trolley.
Yeah, where the trolley stop was
Right.
on Northern Boulevard.
On Northern Boulevard and Woodside Avenue. I guess the whole thing used to be, I don't know what it used to be, but there was a lot of, when it was bought for redevelopment, there was a lot of community pressure to just save that little
Yeah,
brick
that little
structure in the
tower.
corner, and I think it does make a difference that got saved. doesn't it?
Forest Hill, they had an old diner called the Tower Diner that was knocked down, and the developers kept some of like the clock face as part of the facade, which wasn't enough to appease the community, but it was something.
Yeah.
Angel has his hand raised. Let's hear from him.
Yeah, if I may, I really would like to still try to preserve the theater. I really think that in the same way that, with the developers, the Apollo Theater in Harlem was saved. I really think that we could do this. Of course, continuing with the Landmark Preservation Commission, but also with the trying with the National Register of Historic Places, because this movie theater, it is really listed there in the Cinema Treasures of the United States, and there are different things. I really feel I've been there inside many times already and took pictures, etc. I still believe that underneath the curtains and all that are the murals, the original murals are there. And of course, even the lobby, it is, I mean, these old mural, the murals that they painted there is just like a kind of brush there to put some sky and some bushes and all that. But the theater per se, I think it's an amazing value that if we could preserve it, could serve for Queens what they've done with the Apollo Theater in Harlem, with BAM for Brooklyn, to really be an artist hub in general. And even, the thing is that when I've been looking at the application and when we've been trying to get this Preservation Commission designation or whatever, I'm not sure if you took in consideration that, because I looked at the register that they did for the sale, and it's listed there with the wrong classification for the building, because they listed as M1, as an M1 building, which is for churches, synagogues, chapels. And one thing is that the use of the building for the last 50 years has been a church, but it's not a church, it's a theater. So what I mean with that is it's a wrong classification. It's not an M1, it's a J3 that is precisely for motion picture theaters with balcony. And in the case of a developer, if they want to do a theater in a mixed-use building, to preserve it, to have a theater in a mixed-use building, it could be reclassified as a J5 from the J3 that is now. So, I mean, there are still possibilities for the developer by still having a community cultural center there, because of the two levels that are allowed to the city. I mean, we don't have to reinvent the wheel. It's been done in many, even Broadway theaters and in other places where they wanted to keep the theater and build something around. And yes, I know about the Wendy thing, that is not a possibility, but the other possibility of the air rights is because Greenpoint Avenue, and what is there is the supermarket. It happens to be a Hispanic supermarket. I spoke to the owners, and they are interested in negotiating with the developers related to air rights or whatever. So I think that still it can be, the theater can be preserved for the community and all that, and then have do a building around it, as they've done even in the Marriott Marquis on Broadway. That they kept the theater and had the hotel around. So I think it can be done, but for me, it all depends if we can really try to get with the Landmark Preservation Commission or with the National Register of Historic Places to really declare a historical building so that it's not destroyed, period. And then they'll have to deal with it and see how they can do it in a way that can be a winning situation for them. Actually, one idea I would like to put is that in the same way that when they have done this theater in mixed-use buildings, there are actually 17 of them in Manhattan and 2 in Brooklyn. One of the things that was done, for example, was the fact of having affordable housing for artists. If you remember, in Hell's Kitchen, in different areas, they were even, and that's something that we don't have in Queens. So it could be even a good possibility also for artists in Queens to be able to have some of that negotiations of having some affordable housing for artists, for example, as part of the deal with the developer. Anyway, that's what I wanted to convey.
Thanks, Matt. I'll appreciate it.
Thank you. I have a question for Carisha.
Yeah.
Carisha, I have 2 questions. First one, do you think the developer would be open to coming to land use and talking with us about their plans?
I think I could ask. So the thing that I want to make sure that this developer doesn't feel like I roped him into the community board attacking him.
Okay, so forget that question.
I do. Sorry.
No, that's okay. So
Okay.
I
I don't want him to regret meeting with me and having a conversation.
Have you heard from the folks at 6204 about the Mayor Nostrum Theater?
Yes, I have actually. Let me pull up that update. Thank you for reminding me. Hold on one second.
Mayor Nostrum, that they were building on Roosevelt Avenue, and we were all, they're supposed to have a theater in there, right?
Yeah, that's precisely, I think, something that can help. That's with the Entertainment Community Fund. That's what they've been doing for housing for artists in several places.
So Nicola, last time you brought this up with me, Lisa, I emailed Nicola right away. So this was in mid-November. And he said, last time we spoke with the developers was before the summer. So we're now approaching about a year. They said that they have not been able to start building without the city's tax abatement, and they're looking into another program. I'm scheduled to reach out again in a few days, and I'll let you know if there's any other news. And I haven't heard from him since. So it's worth it for me to follow up again, but it seemed like there's no movement on that project.
It was a rezoning possibly before you were.
Oh, yeah, with
city
the
planning.
What's the address?
6204 Roosevelt Avenue.
It's like 14 stories.
So they've done the rezoning.
Yeah, they did the rezoning, but they haven't built anything, and there's supposed to be artist studio space in there, right, Carisha?
Yeah, that was supposed to be the new home of Mari Nostrum. They were going to be given, I think, 2 or 3 studios. And you know, similar.
Yeah.
Can you say the address one more time?
62-04 Roosevelt Avenue. Thank you.
I think the similar scenario with the Eagle Electric, right, Lisa? We had a deal with them, but they haven't been able to find a tenant, so therefore they're not delivering yet on the space.
They may be waiting for the resolution of one LIC, because I think.
Right.
Who? The
Penny's development.
Penny.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
In which case, their plans might radically change.
Wasn't it office space, not housing?
It was gonna be
And
an
they have to
office
have a
building, not
tenant.
housing, but I'm
Right.
not looking at the
Yeah.
zoning map. Will they now be allowed to put housing?
They could all, yes, no problem.
What?
Because it's R9, so yes, they are part of the rezoning. And they will get our FAR.
So I would kind of be amazed if they didn't somewhat alter their development plans as a result. Yeah, but that was for commercial. They
Right,
were
they were
thinking
having
of it
trouble
more
with
like this medical research.
There's residential right, there's a tower right next to them.
Yeah, they're behind them, but
Yeah,
but
right.
not, but there's, anyway. No, they've been very quiet.
I just had a couple of responses to Angel's information, and thank you so much for bringing all these points up, Angel. I'm not sure if we updated you yet, but we did submit to landmarking, and we got denied landmarking of the Bliss Theater because there were too many changes that were done to the building by the current tenants. And also, I did also request to the developer that you know, whatever artworks or structures that might be inside, that they somehow be preserved and honored in some way. Again, I was speaking a little bit broadly because I didn't want to, you know, push any specific proposal ideas. But I did want to just emphasize how important it was to the community that these types of things be preserved. I let them know that Sunnyside was already selected as a Celebrate 6 district. And then if you did confirm with that Green Valley Market, you're talking about Green Valley Market at the corner. If you did confirm with them that they would be interested in having essentially housing built on top of them, then I don't know, Christine, is that potentially an idea?
You would really have to do it. I don't know how deep, you know, how much lot line they share with the theater. You'd really have to look at it and analyze the lots to see what the potential is there.
And then did you have any ideas on the fact that it was potentially miscategorized? That the Bliss lot was miscategorized?
Oh, she's talking about the M2
Oh,
versus
I'm
J3.
not sure. I'm
Just
not.
check the zoning law.
You may be right on that, about the current use, but I'm not sure that that would impact what they could do under you know, what they could do in terms of new construction uses, because already there is a range of uses that are allowed for a new building, so I'm not sure. But the other thing here is, I guess this is, I think that the idea of this multi-use arts facility for the community is a super strong one and is really important in Western Queens, and this would be a great location for it. And Carisha and I had quite a long phone conversation about this, where she kind of updated me more about the kind of, I don't know, the arts powers that be in Queens. But apart from, you know, to me, it's very feasible, and I know, Angel, this isn't what you were talking about, because the retail market is pretty weak right now. It's hard for developers to rent out their ground floors, even if they build them as retail space. So I could see if, you know, them being more than happy to accommodate an arts facility at the bottom of this building, but of their new building, but it's a really, you know, it's not really a land use issue, it's a arts development issue. I mean, it would take a lot of funding and agreement among a lot of players to fund this kind of facility here, even if the raw space were available. So I think it would be great if it happens, but I think it's just something for us all to think about how to make that happen.
Well, and when we did that in Long Island City, and they were supposed to, there was a developer who was supposed to provide the art space for Queens Council for the Arts. It was all about the build out. And Queens
Right.
Council for the Arts could never raise the money for the build out.
The build out is
That was
really
Quetzal, wasn't it?
No, it's a different developer. But
it's the
That current build out in the Millennium Building is still technically incomplete. They were not able to fully fund it.
right, so there've been all these like great arts plans in this community, Long Island City, Roosevelt Avenue, this one, that one. None of them have come to fruition for a variety of reasons, which is so completely, you know, unfortunate and
Yeah.
sad.
I mean, and especially as this community is growing and and changing, it's a kind of critical part of the city.
Right, and then even Culture Lab is at risk because, you know,
Right.
they're gonna build their Culture Lab. May have to move, so.
It's in that district.
Is there any next step we want this committee to take?
Yeah, so that's what I was thinking as well. I wonder if perhaps after another conversation with the developer, we could formally write a letter, but we have to kind of figure out what exactly our requests are. But I don't think that's something that would be happening, you know, this month or next month even.
Yeah, and we've heard a couple of different suggestions tonight. I mean, Angel still, you know, Angel, we heard you about preserving the whole building. That's a different request from asking for some art space to be included in a new building or for, you know, just preserving a portion of the, you know, the entry piece of the existing building. So I don't know if we want to bring this up to the whole board or how we want to proceed, but I agree, we're not really ready to write a letter.
Do we need to take a wait and see approach?
I was gonna say, do we
Yeah,
wanna
that's what-
write a letter in May?
Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds like before we adjourn for this summer.
Give you 3 to 4 months before connecting with him again, the developer.
Yeah, and don't save it for June, because I got a feeling we're gonna have a pretty full.
Right. Yeah, right.
doc.
Yeah, I think that sounds good. I wonder if we should look further into the actual zoning issue, like if there is actually a mistake in the zoning or if there's anything there that we could use to sort of I don't know, could that work to our advantage somehow in sort of bringing up that point if there is in fact a
Clarify that, you can
Mistake.
clarify that, the zoning designation for the theater.
I think what Angel is referencing is not the zoning designation, but like a historic preservation designation. Its most recent use was a house of worship, but I think it's like historic features come from its prior use as a theater.
So right now the zoning on that property is R6A, what, C1 something? This
I
kind
don't
of
know the overlay.
but it's R6A.
But it would allow, I mean, which would allow either the theater or the church, right? Or the overlay would allow the theater based on.
May I, but what was the preservation, the landmark preservation answer? Did they go in and really look that the murals and all that were not there? To just say that, that it has changed? Of course they changed. It's obvious that the Jehovah's Witnesses covered the murals because there was nudity over there. And from the facade, yes, they took off some of the Egyptian glyphos and all that. But I mean, the murals of all the theater, I really think they are there. It's just that they are now covered with just a wash that they did over there. So that's why I don't understand. I mean, about why they answer very quickly the fact that, oh, no, it has been changed. It should not be preserved. I don't.
It's
I
just.
really think we should insist. That's what I'm saying. And also the fact that was categorized wrongly, not as a church because it has never been a church, is another thing. Then to really be able to look into it with the Landmark Commission and also I think the other one, the National Register of Historic Places, because I really think it has a value. It's gonna be 100 years old, this building. And it's really, I mean, we could bring it up to its glory very easily. The Egyptian glyphos, those things can be restored very easily, to have an amazing place there.
Angel, when we wrote the letter, I believe we were talking about the exterior to be landmarked. It's
Oh.
rare in landmarks preservation for them to designate an interior as a landmark. So that's why I think we got the no, because if you look at the existing building, it's detailed and exciting for those of us in Queens, but I think they're holding it to a more of a Manhattan standard of what, say a Carnegie Hall and what that looks like, as opposed to this building. But it's very rare for people for anybody to go in front of landmarks to try to get an interiors designation. And that's what you're up against for that idea.
Nice.
It's a great idea. But
that's why we had some, if there's anything that we could preserve in there, like if we can take the seating, if we could save the curtains, if we could restore the mural, especially if there's already a wash over the murals, then that's not, we have to recreate it and get the funding to recreate it. That's not a preservation thing. But those are all potentially things that we could somehow keep, reinstall, reconfigure. I don't know, but I understand what you're saying, Angel, and thank you for this.
It sounds like
Definitely.
we're gonna check back in 2 months and see if there's a letter we can write at that point.
Yeah, the only question is, and I assume, Carisha, do you anticipate discussing it more in arts and culture?
Whenever there's an update, sure.
If we're gonna try and formulate a letter in June or by June. Before
Right.
we just need to have some, I don't know whether we want to somehow summarize this for the board or how do we get a sense of what we want to say? We can think about that.
Carisha,
Yeah.
at our meeting, we did have a great response from the public who attended, saying they were in support. There were at least 3 or 4 people, am I remembering that correctly, Carisha, who attended the meeting to speak about?
Yeah,
it?
there was a fair amount that were concerned about, preserving the building. Yes. We just have to kind of figure out, what exactly we're asking for in a letter, within the circumstances that we have to, that we're given. At the end of the day, this developer just straight out owns the space, and we don't want to discourage him from speaking to us further. So
No.
yeah, I would definitely want the committees, I would love to work with the committees and maybe even get like full board feedback on what exactly we should be asking for.
Well, we really appreciate your sensitive approach to the developer. I think that was good. but just to let them know the interest without necessarily.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you.
Just wanted to comment really quickly because Angel mentioned the application to the National Register. That's something that I'm also working on and plan to discuss with the folks at HDC. Obviously, we're not actually seeking to get the building on the National Register. That would require the Jehovah's Witnesses to agree to being on that application, which of course they're not going to do, having sold the building. But when I talked to the preservationist about it, she told me that it can be, like drawing a line in the sand. It might be a persuasive tool to say to the new developer, look, we had this evaluated and it's been deemed eligible for this sort of recognition. It's not something that we'd be going around and having it certified in some way that, we'd be going behind the developer in any way. It's just another tool that might be powerful for us to pursue. So again, I'll speak with the folks at HDC about that.
Thanks, Eric.
To city planning, do you have any updates for us? Anything more about timetable?
So I have a lot, basically just follow-ups from last time and kind of like other catch-all from other questions you guys have posed that we haven't been able to answer on the spot. Oh, I also have an update about the industrial plan. Are you guys familiar with the industrial plan at all? Okay.
What, industrial plan as opposed to the study of the IBZ zones?
So it's one and the same. So in accordance with local law 172/2023, DCP with EDC and SBS will be kicking off the city's first industrial development plan. So this law requires that this plan be developed every 8 years or be completed every 8 years. Basically, it's a comprehensive look at industrial economy and industrial lands. It'll include research on conditions, trends, and patterns, feedback from industrial business stakeholders, identification of primary industrial areas, which would be a new legislative way to classify predominantly industrial areas within the city, and to make recommendations on incentives, programs, policies, and other land use tools. This plan is required to be released by the end of 2025. So we are currently in the community engagement portion of this plan. There will be an upcoming virtual info session coming up, I believe in April, but we don't have the exact dates and times and things set yet. So I will follow up with you guys and make sure you have all of that information. There's a website and there's a survey. I can follow up in an email with the link to the website and link to the survey. It's a pretty quick survey, just sort of on like your relationship to industrial areas, like if you live there, work there, and kind of your primary concerns. So that's my first update. Let me just make a note so I remember to email you all.
The city first.
Yes. Industrial development plan. Yes.
So this is
Citywide.
the city council voted to have this.
Yes.
Like last year.
Yep, 2023.
And it includes all industrial areas, not just the IBCs.
I believe, yes, all M zoning.
Yeah.
Oh.
Any other? All right. All right. So, follow-ups. I took a look at the population figures and I have more context to what we presented before. So basically, yep.
This is a direct response to Sheila's question. Is she?
Yeah.
She had asked this question particularly, just on population and the data from last public meeting. And we just wanted to make sure that, this gets back to her. Okay, sure.
Okay, so Sheila last time shared a couple of figures. And I think the kind of mismatch in our data and her data was very much based on the geography used. So our data is coming from the census tract block group level of the entire of the entire context area. So that like boundary on the map that we show, all of those all of the land within that area is being analyzed. So that area in 1990 had a population of about 22,400 residents. The population between 1990 and 2000 increased by 14% to about 25,500 residents. And the following
I'm sorry,
decade,
what was the second number?
25,500.
Okay.
And the following decade, so 2000 to 2010, the population, I'm having trouble talking. The population increased by 12% to about 28,800 residents.
Okay.
So pretty like measured growth. But then between 2010 and 2020, the population increased by 98%. So the population then became 56,500 people.
All right.
Um,
And do you have an estimate for 2020 to 2025?
I do not know.
Because there's been a lot of building in those.
Yeah, so I think so where we kind of pose this on the slides are really introductory as to why we undertook this study. So this big population growth really was in connection to the development of about 20,000 new housing units. So those things made us take a look at LIC and say, like, you know, what's going on here? We need to take a closer look. So I agree that like looking at population growth since 2020 is important, but these are just the figures that sort of told us the story that we should look at what's happening here.
And can I, in the EIS, are they required to look at 2020 to 2025?
That is not something I know off the top of my head.
Sounds like, wouldn't it be 2020 to 2030, so 10-year?
Well, but I'm saying, I mean, as a projection, maybe yes, but just in, yeah. But surely there are, I know there are ways to track year growth on a smaller increment than 10 years. That's the census. Go ahead, Danielle.
So this is the whole area.
The context area, yes.
So because of in another life, I might have helped with redistricting, so I'm very intimate with these numbers. So this isn't looking at like where I live in my census, like my specific tract where I'm sure it grew much more than 98%. Like it's not looking at how it is in certain neighborhoods, I guess. I don't know how else to say it. I know it's complicated.
I hear you. I can't answer this question. I'm tired. I'm sorry.
Okay, no, I understand. My point is, I guess, I'm again, not really asking a question, is that it's like overall 98% seems like a lot, but I think the point is like, I remember doing this for redistricting and like where I live, the growth was like 3,000%.
So you're saying the
the
growth
little-
has not been equitable across the entire
Right,
context.
that's
There
what I'm
was
saying.
pockets of.
Thank you for saying what I'm saying.
All
Articulate.
census tracts did not grow even.
Right.
Yeah, okay.
And yes, like, especially if you pare down, like, the context area is greater than like the Long Island City neighborhood tabulation area. When you pare it down that way, you see even more dramatic increase. So, and then you like build it up to CP2 and like that just changes out like all the data. So, there are a lot of nuances to this data. But that like recent uptick in population, uptick in units was really what preempted this study.
And the figure of 20,000 new units, that's what you estimate were, that's what you believe were built prior to 2020.
So 2010, built since
Between
2010.
Between 2010 and 2020.
So I actually looked at the housing data from that, and that 20,000 units basically goes up until right before the study kicked off, which was in November of 2023. So it's actually from 2010 to 2023, but you get the picture.
Okay. The 20,000 new units, but the population was in 2020. So
Yes, it's not
So,
apples
okay.
to apples.
Remind me how many units this rezoning is projecting?
Between 14,000 and 16,000 units with the two scenarios.
So we can probably expect a little less than what we saw in that decade.
No, you're gonna expect 20,000. Cause there'll
in terms
be
of population.
ancillary, there'll be buildings beside those buildings that'll be higher.
So almost
There'll be
another
more
100%
population.
increase.
It won't just, yeah.
I mean, there's already buildings
Yeah.
under
Do you not
construction,
agree with
which
me that it'll be more because there'll be
Because
adjacent
Just
seats.
taking the existing zoning plus the incremental, so the
Oh, you
total.
mean-
But I don't think ours. The total, no, it's new houses of 17, 16. So I'm sorry, what did you say?
14 to 16.
14, 16.
But then it also be more people than that, because you're not just projecting one person per unit.
Right.
Oh,
Right.
of course,
Right.
yeah.
So then that's like 30,000 people.
Yeah, that's the 30,000 people that we saw with the 20,000 units increase. So if we're increasing 16,000 units, we
yeah.
might have something like 25,000 additional people, yeah.
I believe the EIS will have, or the DEIS will have more your picture of what's been analyzed and what the projections would look like.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, that's population. Next, we had. I actually don't recall what the exact question was on this one, but there was just some kind of like fuzziness about the proposal for the IBZ. So I basically just have a lot of like facts about our rezoning proposal there, and we can discuss that. So I don't know if you guys recall from a few months back, but we presented on the IBZ, and the Long Island City IBZ is actually made up of 5 separate areas that are kind of scattered throughout the neighborhood. So the part of the IBZ, there's only one part of those 5 parts that's actually located within the study area or within the project area and is being considered for land use changes. So just some table setting there. Today, the IBZ within the project area is zoned M14 and M15. Those districts permit light manufacturing uses, and they also permit commercial and community facility uses. This portion of the IBZ is surrounded by growing residential areas, but these residential uses are not actually permitted in the IBZ. So now moving kind of towards the proposal. So upholding the city's commitment to maintain the IBZ as a center for jobs and productive activities, our draft zoning proposal maintains the IBZ's manufacturing designation, but permits higher densities than what's allowed today. So no residential districts are proposed and no residential uses would be permitted in this area moving forward. We propose a mix of M1 contextual districts along the outside of the IBZ with an M23A district located towards the middle of the IBZ, which is centered along 11th Street. Sorry to remember your question now. So 11th Street is a vital north-south corridor, which connects the IBZ with Greenpoint Brooklyn to the south and Manhattan via Queens Plaza to the north. These districts were selected to mirror what is on the ground today. So where the M1 districts are proposed, where we're already seeing a shift to more commercial uses, and where the M23A is proposed, we are already seeing more intensive industrial uses, likely due to the good transit access that I was just talking about. So both the M1s will permit a wide range of uses that are more community serving. So like art galleries, gyms, grocery stores, community gathering spaces, or houses of worship. Which are things that we've all heard come up through community engagement's needs for the neighborhood, would all be permitted there. We are also coordinating with agencies like DOT, and examining the public realm ourselves along key corridors to address any challenges presented by, increasing users in this neighborhood or in this area.
So I'm sorry, we don't have a map because 11th Street goes through the IBC. But then it continues south.
Yes.
And once it continues south, is it going through residential areas?
Yes,
I believe it is, yes.
yeah, here's 11th Street right here.
Which one's? I'm sorry, where?
It's this one. Wait, zoom in a little bit. It's this one right here.
That long one?
See the cursor moving?
Yeah.
What goes up to the bridge.
So it goes here,
Oh, okay.
and what you were saying is that it links into the bridge, into this area.
Yep.
That's the
Truck.
Truck route.
streets there. As you can tell.
There's streets there that aren't paved properly.
11th Street is actually not a truck route, 21st and Vernon are the truck routes. But 11th Street does have a lot of truck loading zones and other things designated by DOT, sort of encourage the truck usage there.
I think I wanted to ask Christine, when you asked that question, at the last meeting,
Right.
was it a question, specifically asking about, like the truck routes or how the competing, what was happening in the streets? Is that the heart of the question?
Well, I'm far from very knowledgeable about industrial zones or what, but yeah, I was just curious to try and to understand if you had industry, this industrial area, what looked on the zoning map like this area where industry is going to be preserved, but it's surrounded by housing, so any route out of it is going to go through high density areas of high density housing, where there's a lot of other demands on the street where people are not going to be happy about trucks, lumbering by at all times of day, and the trucks are not going to be able to go very efficiently if that, how that hampers business. I mean, the operation of the manufacturing, the streets coming and going to the area, and I'm not an expert, but it just strikes me as not ideal conditions for running a business. And just, knowing the conflict we heard about on Review Avenue with the Greenway, I can imagine, and, the number of avid bikers, not to mention pedestrians, strollers, old people, blah, blah, blah.
11th Street at least already has the protected bike lanes on either side, so we have some place to bike.
Do you happen to know how wide that street is?
It's wide.
It's like double
It's
with.
2 lanes either way, and then the bikes.
And there's a thing.
Oh, yeah, now it's,
Yeah.
I'm visualizing.
What's it called?
it,
When you
Yeah.
have a thing in the middle of the street.
Median.
Yeah.
We have
Yeah, it is
Michael
wide.
online with his hand up.
It's yeah, kind of following up on what Christine is asking. I'm curious, the IBZ under the proposed rezoning would allow denser manufacturing within the existing IBZ. And we heard earlier that this was to address like job loss basically in the IBZ. I'm just curious what, in contemplating the additional dense manufacturing uses, what kinds of uses are sort of contemplated? Like what uses would be enabled under the new zoning that currently are not allowed and that we imagine might get built if the IBZ allows additional density?
So the M1s are mostly remaining, so there's currently M14 and M15s. And we are basically proposing to rezone those to the M1 contextual districts. So there's still gonna be like M14A, M15A. 5A.
Yeah, I guess I'm trying to ask something a little more concrete, which is like what types of businesses that are not currently viable would become viable given that.
That's sort of what I'm trying to explain, like, we are not like substantially changing the district. We're moving it from like a base district to a contextual district, which means that the height is set. Whereas like, a non-contextual district would be, sky exposure plan, regulated by the sky exposure plan. So it's a less defined height, whereas the contextual districts have a defined height. So the M1s basically have the same groupings of businesses and groupings of uses permitted and businesses that could come to the area. It's just a change in like what the building form would look like.
Right, but presumably by changing the building form, we're trying to reverse the job loss that's happening. That can only happen if some businesses that are currently not able to operate in the zoning district become able to operate in the zoning district. I just don't have an image in my head of like what those businesses are. And I'm curious to understand the uses that current zoning is hampering from.
If he doesn't understand current use of things.
I don't have a
Can
current
I
use.
say something about that? Because we've talked for a long time in Long Island City about floor plates and doing the kind of things that Boyce does with, kind of a bigger, wider, like a lot of the industrial buildings that are there now are antiquated. And so it's hard for a high-tech company to position themselves in that community and be effective, because the way the buildings are laid out is difficult for them. So some of the other uses they've talked about in the neighborhood are like biotech and other technology. I mean, those are the kinds of things there may not be a lot of there now, but there could potential to be, because there's more adjacency with Cornell Tech and all of those things. So historically, that's a more modern mix, Michael, that we've talked about in Long Island City that has been limited historically.
Yeah, that's super interesting. Thank you.
That was a great response, Lisa.
That's our response. Lisa responded for us. Thank
Sorry,
you.
I mean, that's what
I have to say, it would also be really interesting for the board to hear and for a city plan, I mean, to hear more of, it isn't just, you can zone something for something, but if nobody can, if it doesn't make economic sense for a business to build that thing that you've zoned for, then it's not gonna happen. And I think the board has heard, in my time on the board, which is the last 6 years, we've heard a number of people, developers come wanting to build biotech, new healthy office buildings, biotech space, blah, 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 blah. And none of it has happened, to my knowledge, in this board, on any of those proposals that we've heard. And we know with Long Island City that, when they rezoned in 2001, they anticipated all of this mixed use development, including a lot of new commercial space, and I guess new light manufacturing. But at least the light manufacturing didn't happen, and not a lot of the new commercial space happened. So, so what does an industry analysis look like that really talks about what actually is working or is likely to work? That we really haven't heard that perspective,
Right.
which isn't a zoning perspective, it's an economic.
Yeah, I think that's kind of my question as well. I'm relatively new to this area, so I don't have the history, but it's very obvious to me what the residential demand in this area is. You see it every day. There's a lot of towers going up. It's not clear to me what the industrial demand in this area is.
Am I gonna be part of the EIS?
Sorry?
So you're asking, are we analyzing the economic, I'm not sure if it directly is in the environmental analysis, but we can ask our, economic development.
Yeah, you guys have
Yeah,
the reasonable worst case development scenario for housing units. Is
Yeah,
there
yeah.
something similar for business units?
I know that there is some, like residential and business like displacement analysis, so I'm assuming like some of that goes into, that, but I can't speak further to it.
So one thing I do know that is in the area, because it's what I do for a living, is film production and the stuff that goes with it. And I think it started because, well, Silver Cup came, but then I think it further started because the rent was cheaper for those businesses. Now I'm not sure if that's the case anymore, but I do know that. But my actual question is, because this is my obsession, will it now allow for grocery stores to be in these districts? Sorry, it's my very specific issue.
Yes, it will allow.
Not my,
It
not
has always allowed, but groceries would be one of those uses allowed, yes.
Hi, good evening.
Sorry for being very tardy.
Are you community members, members of the public?
We are members of the public who live in the Long Island City.
Also, welcome.
Any other IDC questions for Susan along?
No, nothing.
All right, interagency coordination. So, there were a lot of questions, I think kind of like along that review avenue, kind of, line of concern. There were a lot of questions about how DCP and other city agencies are all working together. And then I also heard someone voice concern about how through neighborhood plan, we're losing the opportunity to get community benefits from developers. So basically, kind of going back to our engagement process, the shared goals were developed based on all of the feedback collected during early engagement. So all of the feedback from the dots and the sticky notes, all of that informed the shared goals and our community recommendations report. All of that was shared out last summer. And then the next thing that the city did was make its initial response to the community recommendations report through the draft strategy booklet, that little blue document that's on our website. So since those strategies were released, the LIC team has been coordinating across agencies to further define the strategies into capital improvements, programs, services, and policies, which would be the community benefits. So we work with, I think, basically every agency, from like DOT to SBS to EDC. Like we have conversations with these agencies regularly and consistently on figuring out how to further these draft strategies. So I'll just leave it at that and we can kind of just go from there. But does that kind of process make sense? So like early engagement, created the community recommendations report, and then the draft strategies are our initial response to that report. And then throughout this continued public engagement process, we're continuing to define those strategies into like actual tangible like policies, programs, services, projects.
And that's through the end of Euler. Like, so we've been working with these agencies since day one of, trying to begin this study. And then we go through the process of thinking through what the draft strategies are, keep refining them as we go through the Euler process. And at the end of Euler, we come up with, finalizing what the strategies are.
We're finalizing what the strategies are, or finalizing what the
For the policies.
what the
Policies and
specific
programs. Yeah, sorry,
implementation.
sorry. Policies and
Right.
programs and implementation.
So I think, I don't know what questions he's answering, but I think it was the MTA question. So the MTA is a state agency. Is the MTA involved in this?
Yeah.
So I have a specific question, because my understanding is that DEP, and I have something. DEP, under current city allocation of roles, DEP is basically supposed to be leading any waterfront development in terms of review of sustainability and the plans. And there's a new woman there that has that role. Is she in fact leading the development of this waterfront? What is it called? The WAP?
Are you referring to the like BCR division in DEP?
I'm sorry, can you speak in actual words and not, I don't know what BCR is.
I actually don't know what BCR stands for either. I'm trying to like get to the bottom of it. People throw it around.
My phone's dead, so I can't look it up.
Bureau of Coastal Resiliency. Sorry, guys.
What is it, Fabiola?
What is it?
It's Bureau of Coastal Resiliency. DP has their own coastal
Yes,
resiliency
thank you.
unit.
That sounds right. That sounds right. And to the extent that this community board is very aware of all the environmental issues along the waterfront, and we have not heard a lot in this process about any specific strategies to, or alternatives that are being discussed in the development of the WAP or in the specific, coastline, interventions that would be done in terms of rebuilding the coastline. And so it's a real concern. I mean, we just, you say these things are being continually refined. We don't hear anything about those refinements. So we don't really know anything more, I think, about the WAP than we knew. Somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, but than we knew a year ago. Is that true? So that's a real concern.
So that was a couple of questions or comments. So
well, it's a comment on interagency. Is it
the
in
first
fact?
question I will answer is from an interagency perspective, we are working with DEP. We are coordinated or connected with Coastal Resiliency. And so I know that I'm not on that particular team, but I know there are ongoing conversations between us and them. They are not responsible for like overlooking the waterfront access plan specifically. That's a zoning document, and zoning is within our purview. We actually partner most closely with parks for the WAP. So it's the zoning is within our purview. It's really what I'm trying to say.
But the WAP when you say zoning, the WAP is part of zoning.
The WAP is basically just regulating waterfront, like public access to the waterfront.
But something like the walkway, the minimum walkway width for the WAP, which in old WAPs was 40 feet, right? And I think there's a huge concern with that. It seems to me like the definition of those parameters has a lot to do with what resilient features can be incorporated. And so to say that that's just city planning and that's not part of BCP or whatever, those are the right initials. That's what I don't really understand. It seems like they would have to be
They're looking
intimately
at the whole
involved.
area. DEP is working with us on the whole area, thinking through everything. So it's not like we're piecemealing this. We're working closest with the parks because we want to make sure that we have resiliency land, park areas along the waterfront. But I think ultimately the DEP every agency gets hand in hand with that. We meet very regularly with all of them to try to figure out what we're going to be able to accomplish here and how should we do it.
And to the extent that these conversations are refining some of the initial goals, that it's not possible to share some of that.
We definitely will, absolutely.
Can I ask you a question about that, which is, like, you talk about the 100-year floodplain or the 500-year floodplain. Like, what are the metrics that DEP uses? And, those are the kinds of resiliency, forward thinking that we are been looking at, right? So they're gonna come back to us and they're gonna say, well, the 100-year floodplain said this, and we know that, there's been more flooding than a 100-year floodplain would suggest, then there'll be a lack of trust by folks in the neighborhood and here thinking that, what their metrics are is limited.
So we do through the WAB, we do regulate the, like the sea level essentially, like what elevation you have to build up to like help with flooding and other kinds of concerns. So that is like an element built into the WAB, and I know that there are experts like weighing in on what that level should be or is. And then I can also share that something I didn't mention but should have before is that like construction activities in state designated tidal wetlands or in the water require permitting prior to any kinds of construction activities. So even though there are maybe not oversight on the like specific WAP development, there's still oversight on the actual development that's occurring in these sensitive areas. Did I make that worse?
I mean, here's an example, like, I think I've said this before, but it's worth mentioning again. So if a developer is on the waterfront, first they have to come and get a waterfront cert, right? They're on a waterfront lot. So then we have the purview of reviewing like the dimensions of their overall site. But we work very closely with parks because they need to be able to understand, okay, well, there are these requirements of benches and linear feet of bushes and trees and shoreline dimensions as well. So we work closely with parks. Then before they can even get any permits to build, they need to get the okay from DEP on their uniform stormwater management something. It's an acronym where they say, hey, we're not actually just doing runoff. Like, here's the million things that's going on. We're building pavement and it's going into the streets. They're actually trying to be very proactive, DEP, in saying that let's use gray water system. Let's use I'm sorry, I don't know the exact terminology and the colors that they use for recycling water onto their site so that they retain as much as they can within the building, first of all, without distributing it to the city or even, I mean, the water side. So it's what I'm hearing is there's a strong desire from the board as well as the board to have an understanding of what happens if the DEP's planning and how does that coordinate it just overall. Is that
And
correct?
their level of analysis,
And the level of analysis.
what metrics they use and, yeah.
Got it.
Alright, so another question, or is that all before we move on?
Mhm.
Okay, another question was about looking into postponing the effective date of the zoning proposal. And it is not possible to modify this effective date. This is laid out in the city charter, section 197C and section 200 subdivision 2.
What was the last one?
I'm gonna tell you. He's a lawyer.
That was like, we could pass it and they implemented 2 years later, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Subdivision
But it-
2,
Subdivision
That was
two,
a
200
Steve
subdivision.
question.
and the other was 197-C.
Yeah, it's a Steve question, and Steve is a lawyer, so he'll actually count.
Okay.
That one was pretty straightforward. Let's see, I had some notes on street mapping actions to help you guys out, but you didn't even need me. What else? I guess the last thing I have on my list here is, the street mapping actions. No, I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. The last thing I have on my list here is another virtual info session. This one will be held on April 7th. This is related to the Long Island City Plan, and we'll be walking the public through the ULURP process, which will be laying out future opportunities for the public to engage at the community board, borough president, city planning commission, and city council level. I do not have links and registration and all of that just yet, but as soon as I do, I will make sure you guys all get that information in the email.
This is a virtual event? Is that right?
This will be virtual, yes.
April 7th.
April 7th. I don't have further detail. I will be sure that you guys get that in email.
It's Monday, right?
Yeah.
April
17.
Yeah. Is that, some people ask us to do that. Is that in preparation for certification? Yes.
So
Yeah.
do you, what, can I ask, what is your current anticipated date of certification?
I don't have the current date, but, you know, as we said before, it will be in the next couple months, that we've been talking about. I know June was floated here a lot, and I don't know where that came from. It's not June, so
So
we
it
do
would be before
anticipate.
June, it would be before June, is that what you're
Yes,
saying?
that's the anticipation, yes.
60 days before the end of June, so you actually have time to respond. That would be May 1st. No, I mean, the community board has
Yeah,
60
yeah,
days
yeah,
to
yeah.
respond.
Yeah, you know, we don't meet in the summer.
Of course, we would have.
I'm sorry.
April 1st. May, June, you're right, that's coming right, it's not gonna reach.
Oh, we call Carisha, go ahead. Good looking out.
Yeah,
Alicia?
60 days.
Yeah, sorry if I missed it, but given that next month is April, are we to anticipate the EIS to be released next month? So that we have the proper amount of time?
The EIS is released the same time as certification,
And it's draft.
in a draft EIS.
Right, okay, so does that, can we anticipate that it's coming out next month, so to give us the proper window?
Well, it will be released the same time as certification, whatever that is.
Sometime
But it's
between
after
tomorrow and May
April,
31st.
no, but it's
No,
after
it's a May
April 7th.
it would have to be May 1st to give us 60 days. All of May
That's
and
to
all of
the,
June.
yeah,
That's to the end
so,
of June, but we meet,
and
the board
we,
meets at the beginning of June, so
so,
we might have to, I mean. move it.
right, we have to, we've done it before.
I was basically just trying to gauge if, you know, that release of, the draft or whatever was gonna be on time for us.
I think we'll have to make time whenever it is.
Yeah.
We have this task force that we've set up, so I think whenever this gets released, the task force will have to start meeting pretty often.
I actually have a question about the task force. Have you guys thought of, like where you meet us? Because we've offered, you know, to come to any questions you have.
Yeah,
when that-
I think we'll have to sort all that out once
Okay.
it's released, and we'll probably break down all the
Okay.
documents into different chunks and,
Gotcha.
yeah, and have like specific conversations for each of them.
Okay, we'll be on the ready.
So the rezoning, I mean, the certification is sometime after April seventh, but before May first.
Or
In
May
your timeline, to give us 60 days to vote before we don't meet over the summer.
Anticipation.
Yeah, that was basically what I was
I'm
trying to
gonna
ask.
be really frank with you. Is there any possibility to, to have it be September and we'll all just duly work on that? I mean, like.
I think if we wait till September, we also stall further conversations. We're kind of spinning right now. And I think once we have all of the documents, which is what we use for certification, we'll begin our conversations that get further into the information and have everything that we can look at together.
The fact that there's an election at the same time.
Mayoral primary, it's gonna be
That's
hell.
gonna be kind of crazy, but.
We're one of our
lives.
elected
Yeah,
people.
all the
Right.
time.
Does the charter specify that you can't, that that the draft EIS, which is what's gonna be released with certification, right, or 10 days before, I don't. That there has to be that interval, or could you release the draft EIS and delay certification to allow people more time, more conversation about analyzing what's in the draft EIS?
I don't have the exact citation for this one, but I do know that, like, especially for like private applications, once an application is complete, we do have to certify it right away. There's,
Well, that's not the same question. Oh, you mean the draft EIS constitutes completion?
it is a portion of the overall like project documents that need to be submitted.
I don't know where in the charter it says it, but I understand your question. You're asking, does the draft environmental analysis have to be paired with certification, right? Is that the
Well,
question?
and I'm responding to what Laura said, which is, we're spinning right now. We're spinning because we basically have so little in front of us. So we ask you these questions and then we really have nothing specific to talk about. So it's probably just as frustrating to you as it is to us. So, I mean, in my mind, it would just be more rational to get a more complete analysis of the draft EIS, which I know from having seen them is a huge, ginormous document. Yeah. And give everybody a chance to absorb it and analyze it and then have rational conversations. That's really I guess that was a question. Is it possible to? I know it may not be politically, there may be reasons why, there's this push to get this done this spring, but it would be nice to have a more specific to have more time to respond to a more specific proposal. That's.
And can I just add, I mean, the last time this came up against the summer, we had to go to our council person and we had to get an extension and it became a really like confrontational, like, this is what you're doing to us. Why are you always doing this at the last minute? We're telling you, we don't want that.
Yeah, no.
We're asking you to be respectful of our meeting timeline and to help us to do a good job.
Yeah, no, we definitely have begun the conversation of making sure when your meetings are, we understand when they are. And how to make sure whenever there's a decision that we're lining up. Absolutely. No, we've heard it.
Is it DCP that controls this timeline, or what agency controls this timeline?
The ULURP timeline, yes, we control the timeline, like the ULURP.
Okay. Okay, so yeah, because we've been requesting for months now just to flag to make sure that we do have enough time, and now we're getting down to it, and I think we're all sort of feeling a little uneasy that there's no real guarantee that we're going to have ample time to do our process. So is there anything else that we can do to like make sure that we don't come into the same situation that Lisa was talking about? Otherwise, what's the point of us asking you for months and months if it's not going to be honored.
So Lisa's question, yes, we're looking at what dates you guys all meet and making sure that we can figure out how this will concur with your land use committee and with your full board committee.
Okay, thank you. And also like, thank you for just always coming and answering all our questions. Sorry that we tend to lead with a little bit of anxiety.
One big thing anyone ever said to me was I ain't leaving. No, we're not leaving.
Do we have a June meeting or? is
Yes.
May our last? Oh, okay.
June is the last.
There have been times, like my first year, we had 2 June meetings because
Right.
for something.
Right, we had,
I don't know why, but one was the first Thursday and one was the last Thursday. I was
Got it.
like, lemon for like,
We all hands on deck, so that's really.
So Katie, are those all your updates?
Those are my updates.
Thank you. So this is kind of a segue into what I just wanted to mention to the committee, or really it's for all committees that I think this process and then this process that we've been through for the last year of requesting a lot more specific information than we're able to actually see, to try and grapple with some of the implications of the issues that, you know, of this rezoning, but other things that come before the board. And then the very compressed timeline that we have to actually respond once we get any information kind of brings home what I think is really lacking to this board, which some other community boards in the city do manage to get more of, and that is technical assistance to the board on a variety of issues, and we have been looking into that for certain specific studies, but I think what we're learning is that there are a lot of organizations, and Lisa can speak to this too, like some of the graduate departments of planning and engineering and other things that are really interested in a lot of the issues that we're grappling with and can provide interns. And there's also other, you know, advocacy organizations that can provide funding, but it's something where we have to anticipate more to really get it in a timely way. The help is out there, but we have to be organized and think about the things that we want to study or are concerned about and ask sooner than we have in this case. So I think given the pace of change in this board, in this district, we should really think about, and maybe at a different point, have a longer conversation with some of the committee chairs and stuff about what kind of issues we want to study and, you know, maybe reaching out in advance, because there is help out there. It's been a little frustrating not to,
Christine, can you talk a little bit about the funding needed or something like that? Or what is?
well, if you're going to something like the the graduate department, or, some of it is pro bono in that case. Some of it is also by grants, for instance. We did, I don't know how Lisa managed to anticipate this, but we did get some funding through.
The council person. So the number of years ago, when we were
Yeah.
doing Long Island City,
The your
neighborhood
LIC.
study, the Your LIC, the neighborhood study, there was a special allocation of city council manic fund that we received to hire a consultant who worked with us and was extremely helpful to get through some of the intricacies of, you know, rezoning and you know, the idea, I thought somebody had said in the city council voted for technical assistance. It was in the charter reform, when in the charter reform, there had been, when they instituted term limits, there was also a comment about technical assistance with community boards, which also was never forthcoming.
It was an unfunded mandate.
It was an unfunded
I
mandate.
think I just read that the borough president, our borough president, just put aside money in the in next year's budget.
I heard that too.
Yeah.
but
I don't.
Next
probably
year's
heard it in the
budget
board
is not a
meeting.
done deal
Yeah.
until it's.
Yeah, no, but
So, I mean, there. Yeah, I don't know. So that was a special allocation that I think all the community boards got that year. And we used it for consultant,
But
but that's, money's not coming now.
But I would, but there, it's council, there's also councilmanic, that sounds sexist, but anyway, discretion
Yeah.
about their budget, and some community boards have a regular, I did learn this. Community Board 5 in Manhattan, one of their council people gives the members, gives them a, yearly allocation, $5,000 for consulting of however they want to use it. They have a zoning consultant. Right now, they're looking at a very significant rezoning in the Garment District. He does 3D illustrations for them of what the zoning implications are, so they can understand what the buildings will look like on a narrow street and a wide street. I think that would be enormous. So, I mean, another strategy that we have is to appeal to our council people in a more direct way for that kind of regular funding. I'm just saying it happens. I'm just.
No, I agree.
The ones up for reelection,
What?
the ones up for reelection.
Whichever. Aren't they all up at the same time? Not like that.
So I would just say, you guys have set up this working group. We are committed to be as detailed oriented with you in those working groups or in the meetings, once we have all the material. And I completely support the idea of what you're thinking of, but I also know you have to figure out how the funding works. We're committed to being here, and we'll bring other people with us for particular topics. So when you're thinking about your working groups or how you want to set this up, I personally think it would be beneficial if we're there to kind of like dig into it more with you.
Oh, 100%, you will definitely.
So, okay, you said you weren't sure, so I was like, I think we could, it'd be good if we can.
But just, and thank you, Laura.
Or just. Would we get DEP people?
I think it depends on what, you
Yeah,
know.
we'll probably
how
have
we'll figure it
specific
out.
meetings for specific issues and we can request
Yeah.
people.
We could talk through that.
For me, I think we just have to really ask.
Yeah, exactly.
But
But
just
probably set up a calendar in
to-
advance.
to-
of all the meetings.
And thank you. But I also think something like the discussion we were having about industry, the industrial zones. That's something where we could anticipate and maybe frame a study that we'd like.
Yeah.
NYU Tandon or somebody else it's right within their purview to really look at, and that could be really helpful, because some of that nobody else is really doing.
Yeah, I mean, our economic development team is pretty advanced in working on that, and I think I'm extremely excited about this industrial plan because I've worked in a couple cities now, and it's been such a challenge to get the best framework for them, because industrial and is changing so drastically. So I'm super excited about this, and I really do think that we'll have something at least good that satisfies what we need to do with the local law, but I think we're ready to want to advance that even more. But I agree with you.
We have two hands online, Michael and Caricia.
Yeah, I was just curious on the earlier point about technical assistance for analyzing these kinds of proposals, whether this is the kind of thing that the board has historically included in community board budget requests, and if not, was it something we had contemplated?
I think so, we have put it in the, I believe.
Yeah.
We, Lisa, I thought that one year where we got the funding for, is that another, was that another penny that we worked with?
What?
When we did the resiliency plan, I feel like we had put that in the budget for a couple of years and then we got that money. Was that not the case?
The bond, that was the councilman's money.
Oh, okay.
We did the waterfront working group.
Okay, yeah, okay.
And maybe it's just something to think about in a couple of months when we start doing
I
it.
mean,
You're right.
right, I mean, when the community board plans its budget, the community board could also set aside $5,000 for
I was thinking too.
technical assistance. It typically, you know, at the end of the year, the community board has invested in, let's say, office supplies. But if there was a year that wasn't, you know, we could work it out. That would also be an idea.
That is something that other boards do. I did learn that from my conversation.
CB1 did that. They took some of their community board budget and used it for consulting.
I don't know anything about our finances, but we usually have funds left over at the end of the year, or is it pretty tight every year?
I think a big part of our budget is our tech support for the board.
Tech support and salaries, I mean, that's pretty much,
Yeah, people are flexible.
right.
Because it would have been-
Well, the city pays for that.
I mean, the, Northwest.
Yeah.
Live stream is expensive.
So,
And Patricia, I think, you know, a similar study of around arts art facility development might also be something that I think consider.
Yeah, I'd be happy to look more into that for sure. Thank you. I also had my hand up before just to make sure we didn't, that we had a little bit of time. I wanted to just flag William Jourdain on the call, who wanted to bring up a concern about landmarking another building in Woodside before we adjourn. So I just wanted to like flag that for in case there's in case we're at that time in the meeting.
When you want to speak?
Hey, sorry everyone. Can everybody hear me clearly?
Yep.
yeah.
Awesome. All right. Peace and love to the amazing land use committee here. You guys are working diligently. So many issues that you all are tackling simultaneously. So I appreciate all the hard work that you're doing. I don't want to add more to your plate, but I do think that this is an incredibly critical and important initiative, at the very least for us to kind of investigate further. So yeah, Carisha, thank you for just flagging this before everyone adjourns. I did want to bring attention to the church that's located at 61st Street and 39th Avenue. The structure itself was erected back in 1895 after I kind of delved deeper and conducted some research. The church, actually, when it was erected, was built with historic Gothic architecture, which included the stained glass windows, which somehow was pretty much removed last year. I'm not sure if it's actually within the building itself, but it was an integral part of the neighborhood's character back then, being the first church that was built in Woodside. The holy doors itself were also removed last year, which myself and several stakeholders witnessed. We weren't really sure what exactly was happening at the time. And so there were actual modifications that were done to the front lot, which included the pavement of new concrete within the corner of the property itself, including the removal of the doors, as I just mentioned. The interior, though, however, is still very much intact. And there was an addition or extension to the church that was built in 1957, which still does retain its stained glass features. Now, my concern is with the recent sale of this property, I am deeply concerned that we are at risk of losing an important piece of history within the community's history overall. And I definitely want to strongly urge this committee to explore the possibility of initiating a landmark status for the church. I think that we can preserve this site, possibly. Obviously, we need to kind of investigate further to see exactly what we can do. But we can preserve the site to hold its architectural and historical significance. I think this will attract visitors to the neighborhood, support our local businesses, and even enhance the property values for small homeowners in the area. I think just historically speaking, landmarking different sites and preserving sites does increase equity for homeowners. And we do have small homeowners here whose voices aren't, they oftentimes aren't heard. And I think Woodside, in general, our voice isn't heard on the community board, and this isn't a critique on the community board itself. I just think people are just not really attuned to what's happening. So I don't know where to start. I want to be a partner in this, similar to what Dirk actually has been pursuing past several months with the Jehovah Witness Church over there in Sunnyside. I definitely want to just pursue this and just see what we can do. So, any thoughts or questions? I'm here to respond and to listen.
Have you had any conversation with the Episcopal Diocese that owns the church?
The church was sold recently.
No, I know.
I tried reaching out to them. Last year and the year before that. They have been completely hands off. They haven't really been responsive. And at this point, I don't even know who owns it. I actually tried investigating that as well. So I haven't found, I don't know who owns it currently. I did see just a couple of weeks ago that they were doing some protection work on the roof itself. I spoke to two individuals who seemed to either be the foreman or the project manager. They were very elusive. They just basically said, yeah, we're doing protection to make sure that we protect the property. But I didn't really get information in terms of what they're actually seeking to do or what type of development that they're getting ready to do.
So someone that we could reach out to, who I assume he's actually come to community, appreciate you, Carl Adair, who is an Episcopal minister who is currently trying to revive the community around All Saints, but I know that, which is the church on 46th Street. But he is really trying to reach out to the community. I mean, unlike the Jehovah's Witnesses, I think, which had a very hands-off approach to, community engagement, at least nominally. Episcopal Diocese wants to be engaged, and I think Carl is a very approachable person.
Yeah, I need to be more, I should reach out to him again and invite him to these committees, because he's also curating that little museum window in the front of the church facade, and they're also hosting art classes and things.
I mean, whether or not, I just think it would be a good first step. He's there, he's in the neighborhood, and he's definitely tied into them.
Yeah, I also wonder, do we have any other resources to find out who potentially purchased that building? I feel like some of this is on public information somewhere. I'm not very familiar with all the real estate stuff.
Yeah, and
I
like,
read
what is
that,
real
that
estate?
it was, yeah, maybe, because I,
Usually it's Department of Finance, if you look at the real app.
right. and to
So,
see-
Yeah, I checked DOF and I checked who owns what, which is another database that you can check to see who owns what essentially in New York City. Now, the last time I checked, I haven't seen any updates. I need to check again. To your point, Christine, though, I don't know. I'm aware of who Mark is. They've been conducting a lot of activities and outreach in the community, but it really hasn't been. It was a concern of mine. I actually raised to him a while back that people aren't aware of what they're doing. And at this point, since the property itself is sold, I don't know what he would actually be able to do at this point. Or the
I have more facts.
Well, I
Some
mean,
knowledge of the process that the diocese went through to sell it and what their mission was in selling it.
Well, if the diocese sold it, I mean, landmarking, as you well know, William, is really a community organizing effort. I mean, you need petitions and you need to make an appeal to the Landmarks Commission, and I mean, it takes a long time to do that. When, they were working on Sunnyside Gardens landmarking, which was huge, right? They had, many residents and organizing it, and then, Landmarks comes out and they do their survey. I mean, it'd take years to landmark. So given that the property's been sold, unless you're doing some community organizing to talk to the developer, I honestly don't know what anyone here could do. I'm sorry to say.
What I might recommend, though, is he could just submit a request for evaluation to LPC. If William, you really feel strongly about this, and then I don't know too much about this individual, building, but the board could submit a letter of recommendation in addition to
Well-
the RFP.
And I don't know if.
And I just want to add, I'm actually coming here to the committee because I don't know the technicalities around landmarking or preserving a site. This is actually why I'm coming here, for better direction and guidance. And I gotta be honest, just saying like, it takes years to conduct. I'm saying that we are willing to do the work, but that's just not good enough for me. When it comes to Woodside, this is like the constant sort of demeanor and attitude towards these types of deals, and I think we could do better.
William, I'm gonna post the form that's gonna kick off this process. It's the LPC request for evaluation form. So start there, if you're serious about this. But yeah, to this point, I think you're gonna have to get the community behind it and show a lot of support and all that stuff as well.
Okay.
Name of the church?
St. Luke's Episcopal Church.
It's not.
St. Paul's.
Oh, St. Paul's.
St. Paul's,
Yes.
and it's an Episcopal church?
It's a deconsecrated Episcopal church.
Right.
Consecrated.
Yeah, so I'm not sure if the diocese still owns it or not.
Right.
But, I mean, I've been involved,
Means it's no longer a holy site. It's just used to be used as such.
But it
the,
is
the reason that
very
I think it might be useful to talk to Carl, and I'm not, and I'm sorry if the diocese hasn't responded to you, but, it may be true that, I mean, at least their stated mission is that they, want to redevelop their unutilized properties for public good, which may be that they are contemplating affordable housing there. So I think it would be good to know what they're thinking and what the motivation is before, and just to sort of know what the facts are on all sides before assuming, assuming the worst.
William, after a very brief Google search, I'm also seeing that the church was destroyed by a fire in 2007. So
Yeah.
that really hurt the case as well.
Yeah.
Don't mean to deter you and be a downer. If you feel very strongly about this, definitely pursue it. But it sounds like you're gonna have a lot of obstacles on this one. Michael, you have a question?
This is a small point, but I've just heard a few times the reference to the Jehovah's Witnesses not being forthcoming. And like, I don't know if this is broad knowledge, but Jehovah's Witnesses by religion are apolitical. They don't participate in politics. They don't vote. Like, voting is not allowed. So I don't think we should expect ever when Jehovah's Witnesses to participate actively in our political process. And I don't think we should take it personally that they did not like come to the board or try to communicate, because like their faith does not allow them to participate in politics.
We didn't take it personally, but we didn't reach out to them in a political context. I think we reached out to them as the owner of the property.
Yeah, but in the context of we are the government here, right? Like we are the community board, which is a public body appointed by the borough president and so I wouldn't like, yeah, it's just like I've heard it mentioned a few times about how they're not responsive, and it's just like I think it's a religious thing for them not to be responsive, so we shouldn't I'm not sure if that's like a broadly known thing that Jehovah's Witnesses don't participate in politics, but I think it's a good thing to keep in mind on that.
Yeah, St. Paul's isn't Jehovah's Witness. That's not their denomination.
Oh.
But also, I hear you. There's nothing being taken personal. It is their property essentially. And so
No. Totally agree with him. Completely unrelated to this matter. It's just the contrast between the previous case where it was a Jehovah's Witness. Of course, in this case, it's not relevant.
Yeah, totally understand. All right.
This might also be a bigger issue of like, perhaps we should be studying, and this is sort of in theme with what we've been talking about, we should be studying in our district what the historical landmarks are that are important to the community and that have not been sold off yet, so that we can get ahead in the landmarking process. And also connecting to those, to the folks who currently own those types of buildings, so we can have a community relationship with them before it kind of gets to this point in the scenario for the future.
Agreed.
Just a broader question. Has there ever been a preservation committee as part of the community board? Or is that always fallen to land use?
No, there's never, it's always, the community board has not taken an active stand. When Sunnyside Gardens was working on landmarking, they came here and asked for things like letters of support, but we didn't initiate that. It came from the community and they brought it here to ask for our support. So that was something I mean, Christine and I have talked not about preservation, but about, reaching out to churches about space that, like if they have an empty parking lot or
Right.
something that they might want to build affordable housing on. We did talk about that a long time ago, but, there are a lot of churches that have in the city that have declining populations, and things like that. And so, that's something that we could do a survey on if we had technical assistance. Things like that. I mean, but we never actively looked at sites for landmarking. I mean, it's kind of out of the purview of community board in some way.
But
I mean, we don't have to vote on it, land use is always taking the position that, the things that come here are housing related, and things that, from a regulatory perspective, the community board has to handle because we can vote on it.
Right.
Right, that's part of the unique role of land use, is that, we have to bring things that need votes for the city to the full board. So short answer is no.
But I think part of your question may be that there are community boards that have
That's what I was
landmark
going
committees.
Yes.
Yeah,
Like
I
know
think that's
Gowanus
typically-
has both land use and preservation in one committee.
Yeah.
And so they take that on in a different way. I don't know how. but
right, and I think
certainly
like
learn
the Upper
about
West
it.
Side or whatever, or they have a preservation committee or a landmarks
There's a lot of
committee.
landmarks in our area. We
Yeah,
might
I
want to
think that's
consider
right.
that. So we could
Historically,
probably talk to
I know.
Anatole and see if he wants to set something up.
But I don't know, I mean, the pace of applications that we get for landmarks is not that great that I think our committee can.
Right.
I don't know if we want to separate, we could discuss.
I mean, we can talk about, but, I mean, people would have to bring that here. We've never reached that, Yeah, sorry. So that's, anyway,
That's the answer.
the answer.
I don't know if we've given you any, I mean, to me, you have some helpful documents. I don't know if beyond that, we've given you much,
Yeah, listen, everyone provided some just really good feedback and just general input. I appreciate everyone's input here. Pramit, I appreciate you sending me the request for evaluation. I'll start there and I'll reach out to some other folks and try to get the ball moving on this. At the very least, I want to try and see where we land with this. I may have to circle back at some point to the committee for maybe a letter of support or whatever else that maybe.
Let us know when you start the correspondence and what LPC says, and we're happy to.
Yeah, let me just start there, and I appreciate that.
And William, you can come to the full board meeting and testify and talk about the church and how important it is, and if you want support from, wider community and the board.
I'm sorry. I didn't hear that.
You can come and testify at our full board meeting in April. I don't know what date it is.
as a public speaker, is that?
As a public speaker,
Just
yes.
make their 2 minutes of comment.
Yeah.
Yeah, the third.
April 3rd, William.
Sure. What do you want me to present on?
No, just come and talk about the
Say what
church
you
for
just
2
said.
minutes.
Oh, to talk about this particular topic in general?
Yeah, I mean, it's up to you, but you can come to any board meeting and, speak for 2 minutes as on
Oh, right. Yeah, no, I'm aware. I just wasn't sure if you wanted me to present on something in particular. But yeah, I guess I don't see the point of me presenting this to the general board if the committee is saying, well, there's not much we could do at this point, right? So I think I just need to figure out other avenues of support just to get things moving. And if I need to come back to the committee and or general board, I'm happy to do so.
So the other thing about that though, is at the full board meeting, are all the elected officials, William? And if you come and do a public, your 2 minutes of public testimony, you'll get their ear too.
Right.
And you can also ask if anybody's interested in this, come find me, and then you start building a coalition there.
Okay, I appreciate it, guys. Thank you very much.
Thanks, William. And sorry I didn't respond to your text earlier this week, but I'm glad you.
No worries. Thank you.
Anything else, Christine?
No.
Motion to
What
adjourn.
polling?
Oh,
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, well.
All right.
Right. Thanks, everyone. Appreciate it. Take care.
It's so weird. I don't know the phone.